All right, welcome everybody. This is John. Hope you're well, and welcome to our live stream. Wake up or else. We are Christian Fellowship for the Truth of Community. All right, I got a little echo here. Let me take care of this real quick. Hold on. I got to go in here and clear that up. Mute the site. There we go. And as advertised, I am joined tonight by my very good friend, man that needs no introduction, and is just how do you describe Brian Staveley? He's like a juggernaut of Mandela facts and insight and passion. He's definitely a leading voice in our community on this topic, and I'm really looking forward to putting Mr. Staveley to work tonight. We're going to be picking your brains. And so, Brian, if you would, most people know who you are, but in case we have some new folks, if you would just greet everybody and just, give us a little background, maybe a little how you got converted to a kook, living on the fringe, and then where folks can find you on your social media as well.
Yeah, all right. So I'll go through it pretty quick. My awakening journey away from the mainstream and believing everything I've been told and realizing there was something really wrong with the world started in 2010. And it was kind of just like one of those moments that just clicked right there. It wasn't even like this gradual thing. And that had something to do with the 9/11 movie I saw on Netflix, which turned out to be a lot of propaganda in the long run. But it started my desire to dig into that topic and many other topics, moon landing and all sorts of things. After just a couple of months of starting this awakening process, I realized I needed to get my voice out there. So I built a website, started doing podcasts through it, taking live calls, and then, went through, a lot of NASA fakery, a lot of fake events at the schools and all that. And we'll try and keep this safe for YouTube. But you guys know what I'm saying. And then, I took a little break 2014 and I just went to the research and I wasn't doing content. And then in 2017, I did some more podcasts on 9/11 and flat earth and Mandela effect. And then in 2018, I did a few roundtables on somebody's channel, Mandela effect roundtables. And then I was like, well, screw this. I mean, I really need to get my own content going on YouTube. And I never did for a long time because I know how that censorship would be. And, I've dealt with that a lot. So because of that, I'm on tons of platforms, but I'm on YouTube right now, Brian S. Staveley, like you see on the screen. That's my main channel, but I'm also on Rockfin, Twitch, Twitter, Facebook, Odyssey, BitChute. You can just use my same name on all of them. It's the exact same, Brian S. Staveley. And doseofrealityshow.com. You can find all my backup channels and everything else.
Nice.
But I do tons of live streams. I also interview people in the communities, because everybody has a piece of the puzzle. And I also like to introduce people and their personal story to others and, try and motivate people to make their own content and things like that. So it's not just about my content. I try and get, light a fire onto others as well.
Excellent. And I never asked you this, but where does the accent come from? You parked your car in Harvard Yard. Where does that come from?
About 25 miles north of Boston in a city called Lowell. I'm not there right now. I moved right after the thing started in 2020. I moved down here to North Carolina, but I'm from Boston, basically, a little north of it.
Figured as much. All right. Well, just wanted to get that little peek under the hood there. Let me just share my screen. And we got a lot of really great content to share with you tonight. We're going to just kind of be freestyling here. But let me just find this thing. I got to hit the right buttons. So bear with me 1 second. Put things where they're supposed to be. Oh, that's the wrong PowerPoint. There we go. All right, we're going to go to slideshow from the beginning. All right, and share your screen. There we go. Push this over to the side. And what I talked to Brian, I said, what's burning in your heart? Let's talk about something. And probably the most asked question is, Why can't people see? In fact, and Brian, just correct me if you don't agree with this, but is it not, in your opinion, almost like the fact that people can't see these things? It could be any conspiracy theory or the Bible changes, whatever. That to me is more of a mystery than the phenomenon itself. Can you relate to that?
I don't. Well, with the Mandela effect, I don't know if it's more the mystery, but it's certainly perplexing. I just really don't understand it. I can actually see it with some of the other topics, like but like when you're talking about what people experience, what they actually remember, they're just completely getting rid of trust in themselves. So it's pretty disturbing, and it's weird, dude. It's like, why would you want to deny that this is taking place? Like, why wouldn't you want to like embrace it and see what it means and see why this is happening? Because obviously, it's profound. I talk
Mm-hmm.
about a lot of historical changes and a lot of stuff past just the media stuff, which is all legit too. Not all, but so much of it is legit as well. And the companies and the products and the logos. And you're talking about Bible changes, like people's Bibles that have been sitting in their house for however many years, their own Bible, not a revision, not Bible Hub. Those have changed as well. But the original books that they've had in their house that they've always opened and read, the ink on the paper has changed. So whether they think that the Bible is the word of God, or they think it's men, or they think it's alien or an AI, no matter where they think it came from, the fact of the matter is it's supernaturally changing. So that should be important. And I think they really need to consider that no matter what their beliefs are,
No doubt. Right. So the perception issue is what we're going to try to drill down on tonight. And I'm interested to get your thoughts on some of these concepts that I'll throw out there. And so just a quick plug for tomorrow, I'm going to do a live stream because I've been away for a couple months, and I took some time off to try to mend bridges with my family, my kids. I did write a book, which I'll be posting probably in about a month. It should be ready. It's called The Conspiracy Theorist Survival Guide, Advice for Truthers. And that'll be up on Amazon. And then I did work with the Pastors Initiative over the last 2 months. I did send out an email to about 92,000 pastors. And that's something that'll be ongoing. So I'll be talking about that tomorrow at 7 here on the live stream. And just praying for direction and working on the private. I did set up Wake Up. So we are now a 508c1. We're a tax exempt ministry, which was not easy to do, but it's like a 501c3, but it's in the private. So I don't have to file a return. Everybody can get a tax receipt. It's really what needed to be done. So that took a lot of my time, but tomorrow we'll be here at 7 on the live stream. So this topic,
I know you want to save a lot of that for tomorrow, but can you at least tell me like what's your opening approach to these people? Like what's your pitch line to them?
That's a great question. I was actually using this first send to test different approaches, right? So in marketing, there's short ad copy and long ad copy. If you're selling something simple like a pen, it's short ad copy, right? If you're selling a computer software or something that's more expensive or complicated, long ad copy will actually outsell short ad copy 3-to-1 in different studies. So the first thing I tried was just really 1 or 2 paragraph attempts. And then I created a website called hardestbiblequiz.com. And I had a quiz on there with 20 questions, all universal Bible changes. So it's any translation.
Similar to the questions on your 20 that's on the video that you did?
Yes. But they're all universal. So they're in every translation. And we had a very high open rate, 10% open rate, which is astronomical. But then it fell down where there was very little follow through. So ultimately, I went to long ad copy and I sent them basically an introductory thing, assuming they know nothing, and drawing them in, trying to address the underlying issues that make them unwilling to consider it. Like, the Bible can change. I'm not calling God a liar. And you will probably lose everything if you do this. Okay, the rich young ruler principle is why they don't do it. Because as soon as they realize they have to join the ranks of the conspiracy theory kook crowd, that jeopardizes their income and they back off, right? And then as soon as you're trying to convince them that the Bible's changing, that's like saying God doesn't exist. It's ridiculous.
Well, why doesn't everybody think like us and just go with the truth, no matter where it takes you?
Well, that's what we're here to. We are here to explore that, my friend, tonight. Okay,
it's so mind-boggling to me that people don't even. Let's just get into it, because
yes. All right. So the first distinction is we talk about people that don't see, but I'd like to clarify that because they do see. All right. So Jesus said they have eyes, but they see not. So there's two aspects to this. I'll use the lion and the lamb as an example. Okay. So I've gone to probably 20, 30 pastors now, and I've said, hey, pastor, who laid down with the lamb? And 100% said lion. 100%.
Right? I was on an interview last night, and got the guy live on the video. I mean, it's simple. I mean, it's. Go ahead, continue. I'm sorry. It's so ridiculous that we 100% of people, or at least well over 95%, you can definitely say, somebody might say wolf, soon, because it is in there now. That 95% of people in unison are going to say the wrong thing, and that's not a problem. There's a big problem with our reality when that's what's going on.
It's a problem.
When a clear message, when it goes from a lion to a wolf. I mean, could it message be any clearer? Like, wow.
Well, not only do they all misremember the same way, but they do it in such a way that communicates that it's self-evident. So they'll say it like this: well, the lion, John. So there's no hesitation. They don't have to look up to the right or the left, whatever. It's instant recall. And with memory, if you look it up in the dictionary, is recall. It's the ability to recall things, right? And there's a correlation between how easy it is to recall something and how high the certainty is that you have as a human, and how probable it is that you're correct. Okay. So for instance, if you ask me what my name is, my recall is instantaneous. My certainty is 100%. And the probability that I'm correct is very high. Whereas if you ask me what I ate for lunch 2 days ago, now I have to struggle to remember. My certainty drops and the probability that I'm correct drops. So those are the three aspects of memory, right? So I go out and they all say lion. Now, here's my observation. Those naysayers, we'll call them, the unconvinced is a nicer term, but we call them normies. It's kind of derogatory, but we're among family here. So
deniers is pretty
deniers. Common. Okay. So they see, the same way we see.
100%. That's why the idea of the unaffected doesn't exist to me. Everybody's affected.
Everybody's affected. So they see, but what they don't do properly or logically is what's on the screen here in 2 seconds, which is perceive. Okay. So they have eyes, but they perceive not. So they see lion, or they remember lion, but when they go to look at 11:6 in Isaiah, it says wolf, and that's where they fall off the apple cart. Okay. So the word perceive means to become aware or conscious of. So what I typically do with these is then I look at what aware means, and this very often gives me what I really want to know. So the word aware actually means to be concerned with. Now, this is something we can all relate to. And you tell me if this has not been your experience, if you stay with somebody, Brian, on a topic, and you just keep hammering them one data point after another, boom, 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 and you sort of back them into a corner, one of the reactions is like, well, what difference does it make? I still have to go to work, don't I? Or, well, you can't believe everything you see on the internet. So they're just trying to deflect what is absolutely obvious.
Yeah.
But then there's another type of response, which is even more stunning. And that's where they go like this. Well, yeah, the earth is flat, but how did you see the Lakers game?
Yeah.
Oh, so what is that? They're not concerned about it.
They're too comfortable in their surroundings and their matrix, and they don't want to upset any of it. And most of them aren't even thinking big picture like that. But it's like subconsciously that they're thinking that, they just can't. They can't go to there where something would take them that far out of their realm.
Exactly. It's a comfort zone. I'm going to get into that in a second. That's cognitive dissonance, has to do with that whole tribal thing. You belong to a tribe. So
and a lot of these people just don't desire truth in their life. They really don't care about that. They care about status and ego instead of truth. But what's even more interesting with the Mandela effect is there are a lot of people that have seemed to care about a lot of truths along their journey, but then they get to this and it's like they're just not going to go there. So I think they are scared of the supernatural and the implications of that.
Yeah, and you're like Debbie Downer. I call it the normie is like on a mission to have the happy life, right? The happy life is what's important. And you come in with all this kind of conspiracy theory stuff. And the reason you get the cold shoulder, among other things, is you're a buzzkill, right? You're looked upon as I'm watching the superhero movie. Don't remind me that there are actually portals that are releasing demons in the world to kill us all, right? It's all true. What you're seeing, they don't want to hear that because they're having their happy life. So that's what makes truthers who they are, is they are on a war footing. They've gone from like being on a cruise liner to a battleship, and the normies way back here in the happy life, and that's why there's all this conflict, between.
And the ironic thing is, we're actually like the most caring people. Like we do this because we care about them.
Yeah,
right. We don't want to see people deceived, yet we're painted as the complete opposite, and we're just trying to help people not be deceived. And you don't have to believe everything we believe, but start to open your mind and start to investigate reality for yourself, and you'll get there.
Bro, that's a great point. I've said that. I've like, excuse me for caring, excuse me for having compassion on you, but you're opposing yourself. You're denying what is true. Like when I sit with pastors and they go to 11:6 and it's Hus Wolf, and they put on their cape, I call it, and they like, commentary man.
Isn't that one of the fascinating things about this? Like you watch what's going on in these people's consciousness when they try to go in this denial mode and the hoops they try to go through. And it's like you're watching a complete circus, and we'll get there. I want you to finish your story about them looking at Isaiah, but it's like, I do think at times people are overtaken almost like a possession when some of this goes down. So, what happens when you get them to open to Isaiah?
Well, I'm getting better at this, and I'm learning. I don't really go into any of the examples until if I sit down with a pastor now, it's an hour before I actually get to an examples, because I've got to paint them into a corner. I got to deal with all the underlying disempowering core beliefs that are driving their blindness before I get them. Because what I do is I get them to admit to me what they need from me to convince them. So for instance, I'll tell them, 10 pilots, 10 doctors, 10 pastors is my favorite one. So if you have 10 pilots and you give them a simple quiz with 10 instrument questions, and they've been flying for 30 years, how many of them do you think they would get right? And they'll say, well, they'd probably get 10 out of 10. Otherwise they couldn't be a pilot, right? All right. Same thing with the doctors. Simple anatomy questions. How many doctors are going to get 10 out of 10? It's going to be like all of them. So then what about pastors? Oh,
unless you ask them where the kidneys are, you might run into.
Yeah, right.
If they haven't.
Oh yeah. All right. So but then the pastors would get 10 out of 10 correct also. I'm talking about, John 3:16 or like Matthew 7. judge not,
Judge not lest you be
blank, you be judged, right? And they get it wrong. I mean, I've done it tons of times, 10 out of 10 wrong. Well, how is that possible? Well, if you went to visit your aging parent and they didn't recognize you, what conclusion would you draw? Right? What would you think if your aging parent didn't recognize
Well, you would
your
think
own child?
you would think dementia. Let's say.
Okay, correct. So the conclusion that you would make if there was a catastrophic memory failure is that there was mental illness. Is that correct?
Yeah.
And they say yes. I'd say, okay. So if you have a pilot who has an exemplary record, flew in the military for 10 years, commercial 20 years, and now he cannot recognize 10 instruments, none of them.
Yeah.
Okay. Would you agree that that is a catastrophic memory failure?
Yes. Absolutely. Especially when some of these instruments are like the ones he sees the most, like the yoke. I mean, that's what we're talking about.
Bro, he couldn't fly. All right. Same thing with the doctor. If the doctor can't tell you what's the medical term for your skin, epidermis or, whatever. If he can't do that, would you agree that that's a catastrophic memory failure? Yes. Okay. Now I've got 10 pastors, or like if a pastor who went to Bible school, he's been a pastor for 30 years. He's a Jedi, just like the first two, bro.
Yeah.
So don't lie to me. Okay. How many would the pastor get correct? 10 out of 10. So if he gets 10 out of 10 wrong, what conclusion would you draw? Well, he would have to have mental illness. Okay, but what if I could do it with 20 out of 20 pastors? They can't all have mental illness. So we just eliminated mental illness, pastor. Okay, unless you're calling me a liar, and I'm going to have 20 affidavits to prove it, but let's just take my word for it. If it's not mental illness, how did the pastor miss 10 out of 10? It's irrefutable logic.
Yeah.
It's like, so what's my point? My point is what's on the screen here in 2 seconds. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 is, you get these people who come on the social media and they try to debunk the Mandela effect and call us heretics, call us crazy. And their arguments are so superficial and vacuous. Mostly it's just ad hominem.
Almost all of them, and not all. There are some people that can't understand it legitimately. They haven't looked enough. They think it's a psyop, but almost all of them I find to be completely dishonest, dude. Like, yes. You can see them a mile away how dishonest they are. You can see how they twist their words. And I'm not even just talking about dishonest to themselves and doubting their memory and flipping. I'm saying they'll insert things into the conversation that they know aren't true to try and disprove the Mandela effect.
It's true. And so what I do is I go right to things like, if they're adversarial, they're vitriolic, I'll say, do you even know what a flip-flop is? Do you even know what it is? All right. No. Well, if you haven't lifted a finger to look into what the evidence that we're bringing, not what the debunking video says, but what we're saying is why we're all up in a slather, right? What's got us all up, where our lives are being turned upside down. This is not like, oh, I walked out of the supermarket and I can't remember where my car is, or where did I put my keys? Or, oh, I thought his name was Joe. It's actually Jim. No, this is my wife divorced me and my kids hardly talk to me after 24 years of marriage. And I got 200 people probably now that I've talked to over the last 7 years who have been divorced or on the verge of divorce because they're testifying that this is a real phenomenon. So don't lecture me that this is misremembering, okay? Because it's ridiculous.
You brought up the flip-flops. Not only the fact that they don't know it, when you do explain what a flip-flop is, well, that takes the idea of a false memory completely out the window. I mean, you watch it change and change back. People observed it, yep. And some of them, even though most of the evidence disappeared on such a major one like Apollo 13, there's still enough proof to prove that it changed and changed back if they would just do the investigation. But they don't want to do any of it. No. All they do, you know what they do? They say, well, it's the same thing, right? Companies and logos and brands can change names. Brian, there's so many translations of the Bible, blah, 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 blah. And all they have to do, if they want to debunk the Mandela effect, is go to my Mandela effect list, see what I'm calling a Bible change, and you come back with the translation that debunks it. Or go on a site like Logopedia or one of these other sites. It takes you 2 minutes to go on there, find a company or a logo or brand change that I call Mandela effect, and you go see where the documented change is and come back simple. Mandela effect, that Mandela effect's off the table. But they've never done that because they can't do that, because that's not what the Mandela effect is.
Right. And normies don't like to look. Normies don't look. They don't want to look under the hood. It's like a little 5-year-old doesn't want to look under the bed. So if you try to bring them the evidence, they're like trying to get out of the meeting or change the subject or use anger. Like a husband that's caught watching porno, he'll get angry at his wife to try to use power manipulation to shut her down. Okay, so you just mentioned something. They claim that the thing has changed. The company changed their logo. So here's the Ford logo on the screen, right?
Yeah.
And it's got the little pigtail. And so then another form of evidence is residual evidence. And so here's an example of on a billboard where there's no pigtail. Here's a amperes meter, and you can see there clearly there's no pigtail on that one, and there is on this one.
Yeah.
Okay, now what we're talking about here is not, oh, there's a change, it's so incredible. It's, let's say I'm a normie and I look at that. Now what? Okay, what happens in my mind is cognitive dissonance, or let's do normalcy bias.
I'll play the normie. Want me to play the normie for a minute?
All right, yeah. Before we do that, though, this is what I wanted to show you. As of 1911, here is the Ford logo with the pigtail.
Yeah.
And it's been that way every year since then. So now what is your excuse, right?
Yeah. But they won't go that far. That's the thing. So they'll see the one way that was shown and the other way. They'll see the residue. They'll just assume that there's been two versions of it. At some point it was changed, and they won't even, it doesn't even take 5 minutes, John. It takes less than 60 seconds to look up and see that it's been with the curly Q all the way back. And then to take it to another level so they can't just say it's an internet hoax. Listen, we're not talking about obscure things here. We're talking about the most produced book in the history of the world, the most popular car manufacturer probably in the history of the world, right? So it's not like there's no Fords around. Go outside and look at any physical Ford and look at the emblem. We don't care what year it is. It's going to have the curly Q in it. So did the Mandela burglar come by and swap out every emblem on all the cars and change every Bible in everybody's house to run some psyop? Or do you think maybe there's a problem with this reality? Let me throw something in here. You know how you 100% lion and lamb. Same thing, my experience with that, or with Matthew 18:20 on the street talking to people. 100%. Nobody says 2 or 3. Nobody tells me 2 or 3, right? Here's a little thought experiment I like to tell people. I call it the grocery store, right?
Okay.
You lock 100 people in a grocery store, right? Like, adults, right? My age, around my age, your age, whatever. Lock 100 adults, people that would be in a grocery store. You ask them, one of these simple ones, like a slam dunk one, like, what did the witch say in the mirror in Snow White? 100 out of 100 people are going to say mirror, mirror on the wall. And yet it's never been that in this reality. Like, even if 20 of the 100 people all said the wrong exact answer in unison with each other, there would be something to look at here. Like, that would be a little pretty strange. How about the fact that nobody out of the 100 is going to tell you magic mirror, but that's what it's always been. By the way, it's one of the most popular animated films of all time, and it's been around for like 70 years. So how does everybody have it completely wrong? And then on top of it, you have Walt Disney quoting it himself in the 1950s, mirror, mirror on the wall. We could go on about that. The movie's dubbed over in other languages before the change happened, and they still say mirror, mirror in the other languages because it's got a different audio track. Like, what more do these people want? How could they just throw away their memories so much to just go along with the Matrix and say, no. And here's the other thing that they always do, and then I'll shut up for a minute. They look for one. They don't understand that this is a phenomenon that's happening. This is not a all or nothing thing. So they could get hit by 15 changes they know affect them, and they just look for one they disagree with and try and discard the whole thing. And it's mind-boggling.
It is mind-boggling. I've seen that a lot. And so I'll touch on one of these proofs. statistical probabilities is a proof. It's a scientific discipline, statistical probabilities, and we can draw from that to prove that this is an unexplainable phenomenon. It's not misremembering or implanted thoughts or confabulation. That's a naturalistic explanation. It's not that. This is exotic. It's unexplainable, and statistical probabilities proves that. And I'll use this mirror example. Early on in this, there was a guy that was a sociologist, and I saved this study, but I cannot find it. He had 25,000 people on an online survey for the Mandela effect. And he said that in sociology, if you have a group of people that see a car accident, let's say, and they're misremembering like what happened or the colors of the cars, let's say, anything above a 5 or 10% variance in the different stories is an anomaly. Okay. So in other words, if one car is blue and one car is green, if everybody, like 90%, misremembers the cars as being orange and red, if 90% remember it the same way incorrectly, that's a statistical impossibility.
Yeah, and that's what
anything above 5 or 10% is an anomaly. So this guy had where 92% of people, 25,000 people, all misremembered mirror on the wall incorrectly the same way. That is a statistical impossibility, and he had about 20 of those. And so that brings me to this slide here. So we're not relying on our memory to come to the conclusion that our reality is malleable, right? We're drawing from biblical prophecy predicted this event. It's let's see, Daniel 7:25, Revelation 20, Amos 8, 2 Thessalonians 2, and then my favorite, Revelation 13, where the God gives the devil power and authority to wage war against the saints. Because that's the biggest argument. Well, John, the devil doesn't have that much power. I'm like, of course not. He's a dog on a leash, but if God gives him the power, he does, which he did. So then you have residual evidence, which is so impossible to explain. Statistical probabilities, flip-flops. Then you got notable figures like, hello, Enoch. In the 80th chapter of Enoch, he says, in that day, which is this day, all of the, help me out here, everything on the earth will alter and be out of its time.
Yeah.
I mean, if that doesn't describe the Mandela effect, and then, of course, he called it because he said all of the fruits will be backwards, and, of course, bananas now grow up. Now, then we have vivid memories, which...
Well, this is the big one, dude. I mean, this one is like, we have anchor memories that back up these things. It's not just like you can call it like a misquote or something, like the Volkswagen. You know, I talk about that. There used to be not just the emblem that changed, but there used to be 2 spellings for Volkswagen. And I remember when I used to look in the car part magazine to get parts for my car, if I wanted to order something, I'd have to know if, you know, I was ordering the German or the American. And the German ended in EN and the American ended in ON. And now there's never been an ON, never been a Volkswagen ON in this reality. And that's not just me not knowing how to spell something. No. Like I have, you know, anytime I would look in the car catalog, I would see the 2 spellings because I knew I had to know the difference of it.
Right.
And I know what was on my car.
Human beings have the capacity to be certain about things. So it's a non-corporal emotional state. It's not like a belief system. It's an emotional state that you hold inside you. So the missionary believes that people are lost, so they forsake all and they go to some, you know, jungle to win the pagan to God, right? So why do they do that? Because they are certain the Bible is correct, right? And if they don't go, they're lost. So certainty drives people to take extreme action, and certainty is something that you don't necessarily have all the facts about. It's just, I know that I'm right on this one. I feel it in my gut or whatever. So this is where vivid memories makes people implacable. Like they're just, if I woke up, my name is John, and now I wake up and it's, Tom, I don't care what the date is for. My license is different. Everything, my bank accounts all say Tom. I don't care. Okay. Because I have certainty. You understand? I don't have a history of mental illness. My name is not Tom. I don't know what's going on, but you're wrong and I'm right. No, it can't happen. No, I'm right and you're wrong. Yes, it can. No, it can't. Yes, it can. It's just like, shut up. Period. It's just this certainty where you just put your foot down. And a lot of us have memories of things that are sort of vivid, and then you get to what Brian just called an anchor memory. Okay, so for me, it was the Monopoly guy. That was my closer, baby. When I saw the Monopoly guy, and he's like, "Where is the Monopoly guy?" I got him in here. Hold on, here he is.
You got funny because I just did another short video addressing this because it just came up in somebody's video and I went on about it a little bit. It's just so ridiculous that he's never had a monocle in this reality,
Hey, did you?
I mean, you have anybody to describe.
Your camera went off, by the way. Oh, there you go. All right, so look at this on the guy on the left. I mean, the answer's absolutely yes, and the guy on the right is absolutely no. So then they try to come along and insult your intelligence and try to suggest that you're just befuddled. You can't remember your math tables. You're bumping into walls. You're just a mess, right? You know what's happening. They're like this. Oh, John, I could clear this up for you. They're like so cavalier. It just this condescending tone, like you're just confusing it with the Planters peanut guy.
Yeah. And by the way, the Planters peanut guy is nowhere near in all the countries the Monopoly man is. Right. So many of these people have no idea even what the company Planters peanuts are, but they know the Monopoly man and they know he had a monocle. It's just like the Fruit of the Loom, right? The Fruit of the Loom's never had a cornucopia behind the fruit. And these idiots want to come out. And I've had some of these deniers come at me and literally just read the script. They literally did the Planters thing and they came out and said there was never a cornucopia. You guys are just mixing it up with Thanksgiving. I mean, I never even seen a cornucopia in real life, never at Thanksgiving or anyway, only on Fruit of the Loom, Right. And exactly. They don't have Thanksgiving, and Thanksgiving's not in every country, but Fruit of the Loom was worldwide, dude. And yes, we do have people all over the world.
Yep. So you said
the residual evidence that we have is substantial. For every Mandela effect, at least every Mandela effect I consider legitimate, there's substantial amounts, like pile, endless residue. Like it's just because that's what the reality was. The idea that people can ignore all of that is mind-boggling. And none of the disinfo, none of the articles. People think, here you go, see the Mandela effect in the news. Before you even play it, I already know what's not going to be in it. You ready?
What?
There's not going to be any Bible changes, anatomy changes, geography changes, huge historical stuff. It's all going to be Nelson Mandela, companies, brands, and logos, and media, right? And if they give you any theories, it's going to have nothing to do with anything supernatural. It's to stick with every one of these. And they always omit, they don't even talk about the fact that we have any physical evidence at all.
No.
Ever. It's never talked about. So it leaves you thinking, even if you see changes, that this has to be some sort of memory game. That's the way they lead people.
Right. So that's going to be our job since they won't do it. So we're trying to explore why people can't perceive this as actually supernatural. So one of the proofs that you can draw on is social proof. So in other words, here's what I'll tell someone. I'll say, look, whatever side of this controversy you fall on, one thing that you have to admit is that there is a controversy. In other words, never before in history have millions of people suddenly been stricken with mental illness of the same sort, like overnight. Okay. And so what you have here, at the very least, is a phenomenon where millions of people are suddenly claiming this life-changing experience And you're calling it misremembering. But even if that's true, it's still a phenomenon. Okay. Because if it's not a phenomenon, why is Fox News covering it? Why are they making movies about it? Why are national publications producing full page spreads on this? Why are the searches for this gone through the roof since 2016 on Google Analytics? And why are there hundreds, almost 100 groups on Facebook, separate groups covering it? It's because something is happening to people that's unexplainable. And whatever you try to convince us of that it's just misremembering, your arguments are unconvincing. They're unresearched, and we disagree, okay? Because 18 U.S. Code 3502 is admissibility in evidence of eyewitness testimony. So the courts disagree with you that the memory is unreliable, because memory can send you to prison for life. And the U.S. National Library of Medicine disagrees with you, because their position is it's generally assumed that memory is highly accurate and largely indelible. That means it doesn't go away. Okay, and we have long-term memory studies, and we have our own experience. Okay, that, we're not misremembering. Like, here's an example I use. If you had 100 people that lived in suburbia for 20 years, so 100 different families. Okay, now next door is a guy named Joe, and down the street is a guy named Jim. Now, you know the guy named Joe next door pretty well because he lives next door. You know? All right, so
you see his routine every day. You talk to him here and there.
Yeah. So now here's my question. What's your opinion? Out of those 100 families, how many of them do you think are mixing up the guy next door with the guy down the street? Out of 100 families, how many do you think mistakenly think the guy's next door's name is Jim? Because they're mixing it up. They have an implanted thought with the guy next down the street. And when I ask them that question, they'll go like this. They'll go, well, I don't know. And I'll say, do you think 100% of them are confused and befuddled and they don't know the guy's name? No. I say, how about 50%? No. How about 25? Well, maybe. Be honest. Well, maybe 20%. I think that's extremely high. But see, what I'm doing is I'm getting them to tell me
how ridiculous it is before you
exactly. Exactly. So my point is that it's our experience is not that we're all, misremembering all the time. That's what they keep telling us. Well, the human memory is unreliable. It's a lie.
Yeah, of course it is.
All right, so then I go like this. Hey, how many people are in the Jackson 5? 5? Wrong.
Yep.
It's 6. And so they go, well, they changed the name to the Jacksons later on. Well, why is there 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 all the way back at the beginning? Yep. In fact, they came on the Johnny Carson show and there was 6 of them. And Johnny Carson's like, hey, why is there 6 of you? It's so trippy, man. I can't even.
Yeah. Right. Johnny Carson also came out there with that huge published clearinghouse check talking about Ed McMahon be there to give it to David Letterman. And that's his sidekick for 30 years. And he doesn't know what company he worked for. No, he knew darn well Publishers Clearinghouse, just like everybody I ever asked. We talk about some things we've been doing, and I'm getting out to the street and introducing truth to them in different ways. And we can wait a little bit to get there. But I right the other night, I just brought it up cold in the street. And they'll tell you you're crazy if you think Ed McMahon ever worked for Publishers Clearinghouse. And this guy froze in the street and just looked at me, right? This is all on video. And I'm like, you remember? So now I've already given him Ed McMahon and the company, so I can't ask him what company he worked for. So I said, you remember Ed McMahon? He said, yeah. I said, Publishers Clearinghouse? He said, yeah, my grandfather used to think he was going to win, and I was going to get this from him when he won it, and but he never won. And I said, so right now, what image comes in your head when I say Ed McMahon? He said, well, him going to people's doors with a giant check.
Yeah, absolutely. Man, there's a ton of residual.
Why does that happen? Why does that happen over and 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 over again? Why isn't almost everybody saying the company he's actually always been affiliated with in this reality, rather than the one that's wrong? And not only that,
Well,
like you said, this tons of ritual. We have it right out of his mouth. Like people say, we want it right out of the horse's mouth. Ed McMahon did a rap video in 2009 where he's driving around in a white van, rapping about how he's going to go and collect back his giant checks from the people that he gave them to. And he actually goes to their door in this commercial, rings the doorbell, and says he wants his giant check back. I mean, how can you deny that type of evidence? And on top of that, even that should be enough to convince somebody something's going on if they didn't have the same memory as us. But they have the same memory as us, and they still deny all this evidence, John. That's the crazy part, right?
All right. Well, I'll take that invitation because you asked me how is it possible. So this is basically the psychologist's definition of normalcy bias. It's the phenomenon of disbelieving one's situation when faced with grave and imminent danger or a catastrophe, as in over-focusing on the actual phenomenon instead of taking evasive action. It's a state of paralysis. So when you see a deer in the headlights, that's normalcy bias in action. So we see this when people underestimate the severity of a disaster and they don't prepare. The assumption is because it never occurred before, it won't happen this time. And people tend to interpret bad things in the best possible light, seizing on any ambiguities to confirm their position. Researchers suggest that when the brain is calm, it takes about 10 seconds to process new info. Stress slows the process even more. So basically, normalcy bias is minimizing the danger or minimizing what it is you're talking about. And that's a very common observation when we talk to people about flat Earth, lunar landing, 9/11, whatever. They just kind of poo-poo it, you know?
Okay, so let's go where I want to go then. So there's definitely that. Okay, there's definitely that going on. There's definitely the heavy indoctrination that people have to fight these types of ideas, right? But I see something else go on. I see people at certain moments, you know, something happens to them, like takes over their soul, takes over their consciousness. It seems like they're infiltrated for a brief moment.
Baby. You go.
And I have a story. I have a story you haven't heard yet.
Okay.
I don't think. So, and I've seen this in action, and we often talk about, we see people take updates, or then but usually what we see is people remember what we remember, and they take the update as in we present them with the new reality, then they just go with it and say, oh no, I must have been blah, 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 blah. But sometimes people get really aggressive.
Just so people, maybe we have new folks, what Brian is talking about, we call it the download. And it's right out of a sci-fi movie. It's where the person says, oh, I remember the lion. Yeah. And then they go there and then they read it and it says wolf. And then I've watched it a couple of times where they kind of go, their eyes glaze over. And then they start going like this. Oh, well, now that I remember, it always said wolf. And then they go off on this narrative about how they remember it was always wolf. Right? Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah.
All right, so go ahead and tell your story.
A lot of that right there can certainly be attributed to their indoctrination and them trying to fight this thing, their stance on religion or the Bible or whatever. All of that can be attributed to that. But then there's another level of it that happens. And so I saw it happen in person, and then I see a couple people that were in the chat that were there with me that night. I know Cleveland Steve's in chat. So I'm doing some new things to try and integrate truth into people, and some of it is through music, like out live, and I'll talk about that a little more later. I want to stay on point, but one of the things we did, we went out and we went to this piano bar. This is just a few weeks ago in Florida when I was down there to do my meetup down there. So there's four of us in the piano bar, and we're actually waiting just to go over to the karaoke bar to do our thing over there, which we'll talk about in a little bit. But while we're at the piano bar, being there, I'm having a beer. I think 30 minutes goes by or so. And I don't know, for people that don't know what a piano bar is, basically there's two guys up on stage with pianos, and they just play all sorts of popular songs that people request. So I didn't really realize the request thing was going on at first. And then I see the cup on the table with a little paper and a pencil for you to fill out a request. And I'm like, I'm going to request these guys to play some Mandela affected songs and see what happens. Right? Dude, so listen to this, right? So the first thing that popped in my head is what's What's 100% that I'm going to get anybody on 100% of the time? And I'm like, Mr. Rogers, right?
Okay. Yeah.
So anybody that isn't aware of this one, it's just so gigantic and ridiculous, and we've been mocked with it by Tom Hanks in the movie. And Mr. Rogers used to come through the door every day. It's a beautiful day in the neighborhood. Now it's always been, it's a beautiful day in this neighborhood. Nobody's ever going to say it that way. Nobody's ever going to sing it that way. You know, it's always been the neighborhood, right? In my reality. So I request them to play this Mr. Rogers song, and things got really weird, dude. This is why, like, when I start to tell this story, this is what another reason where, like, I've always talked about, I feel we're being observed, and these people that don't really have or haven't built yet, maybe not through their own fault, they haven't built the love for the truth yet, they can be really easily infiltrated by some sort of like spirit or something that comes in and wants to block them from seeing this reality for what it really is. Now, this got really crazy, John, because I requested Mr. Rock, A Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood. These guys were up there playing every 60s, 70s, 80s rock song you could imagine, right? Go to play Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, and it got really weird in there. And they're like, oh, man, Mr. Rogers. They started talking about it like they were going to play it, but then they didn't. Then they passes it over to the other guy, right? And we're at the table watching this. And you can see the other guy is really confused because he's like got the lyrics up on his laptop now. So we know what's going on. He's looking at the lyrics and seeing that it says this instead of done. He's getting really confused. And he froze there for a while. Wow. And I said it on my video. I recorded all of this. I'm like, this guy's taking the update right now, right? It gets better. It gets better, dude. Then they play another guy's song. They play another guy's. I'm getting aggravated. I'm like, are they really not going to play this song, right? And then he starts commenting on Fred Rogers and such a great pianist and all this. I'm like, oh, here it comes. They go to another song. They just kept kicking the can down the road.
Wow,
right?
That's crazy.
So then I'm like, these guys are never going to play it. I'm like, okay, I'm going to request another song, right? So I requested Jewel, Who Will Save Your Soul. Now, song, for people that don't know, she now says, Who Will Save Your Souls, every time except the very last time in it, where she used to say, Who will save your soul? Who will save your soul? Now it's Who Will Save Your Souls, right? So also, the guy didn't play Mr. Rogers yet. He starts to play the Jewel song, and he starts belting out the chorus, right? And every time he's just belting it out, who will save your soul? The old way.
Yeah.
You could tell a couple times he looked at the screen, and he did it the new way. And then he still didn't play Mr. Rogers, right? They made another comment after that, right? But he was giving me these creepy looks when he was playing the Jewel song. And actually, before he played the Jewel song, which is interesting, I almost forgot this part. He was like, he acted really weird to me. Oh, like, you're going to do this to me? Like, he was really triggered. And I think it's because whatever took over his consciousness knew I was trying to present him with another Mandela affected song. And I was trying to get this guy to snap out of it. And then he, like, made some weird faces at me in my back. These guys had to tell me about it, right? He plays the Jewel song. And then at the end of, like, singing the Jewel song, and when he talk about Mr. Rogers again, he, like, takes my Mr. Rogers thing, throws it in the trash, and then he goes like this, and he's like, you're going to get no salvation in here. This is what the piano player says to me, dude. I'm trying to get him to play Mr. Rogers. I'm not even joking. I got this on video. Right? And then so, like, I end up leaving and going next door. These guys got off the stage. 2 new guys got on the stage only to play like 3 songs. The new guys played Mr. Rogers. Steve runs over and grabs me, and they're on the stage. The replacement guys, and they sang it the old way. They sang it the old way, of course, and we got that on video too. It was crazy, dude. Great. He literally turned to me. He was getting crazy with the Jewel song, and he's making weird faces at me. And then he, like, after he takes my Mr. Rogers thing, after making another comment about it, throws it in the trash, and he's like, you're going to get no salvation in here.
What does that mean?
I don't even know, dude. It was crazy.
He just knew something was up.
Yeah, I'll send you the video after tonight, Mike. I got a video on it where you can see. I put it all together. We discussed it one night on a show with a few guys, and we watched clips. I got like a 40-minute video. You got to check it out. It was wild, dude.
Well, I mean,
so
I know there's.
I was trying to spark something in him to wake this this human up, and I think that something interceded in that process and took this guy over for a good 40 minutes or whatever, however long this ordeal went down, an hour, I don't know.
I mean, I've witnessed the download myself. I've had it described to me by others numerous times, and it's something unexplainable. The question is it some sort of spiritual thing, you know, where with demons or whatever, or is it a technology thing like the voice of God technology? So you have.
I think it's too observant to be just technology. I think it's got such a. I think these people are just so constantly observed 24/7, and I feel like I'm observed 24/7, and I get better things like synchronicities that I feel are coming from the creator, and I totally think that I'm being observed. I think they're being observed. Their consciousness is being interceded with. And clearly the Mandela effect has a high level of intelligence behind it. I don't think any of it's really random. So,
well, I saw example. I have the article for what's called biomagnetic technology that allowed the scientists to control the mice, where they had a little joystick and they could steer the mouse to the right or to the left at will. So that's 50-year-old technology. So when you then, if you imagine that they have through the Wi-Fi, essentially a Google search always on for your thoughts. That's feasible because they have patents for quantum dot technology that is able to transmit thought, right? So they're basically monitoring your thoughts, and when any of the keywords get triggered, automatically it goes to send mode to override. That's could be totally techno. I've already seen all the patents for that to be real. So it's called LRAD, long range acoustic device. They used that in the Gulf War. Here, let me read the quote. It appears that some of the troops in Iraq are using spoken as opposed to LRAD to mess with the enemy fighters. Islamic terrorists tend to be superstitious and, of course, very religious. LRAD can put the word of God into their heads. So this is from strategypage.com.
yeah.
So they beamed Allah, telling them to surrender, and they ran into their head.
There's got to be if it is a technology though, like with that situation just that I went in, right? So me going up, having the first experience and seeing the Mr. Rogers thing go down, and then going back up with the Jewel thing and the way the guy reacted right away, it makes me think though that something was in him that could interact with me in real time, not just take the information and do like one reaction on it, multiple interactions with them. Do you know what I mean? And maybe I'm not giving the technology enough credit, and it can do this multi-layered, multiple in real time interactions. But he's basing it off what I'm doing, and it's not just one interaction that we had where I just present one thing. It's this multiple and forth. And somebody wrote in the chat exactly what he said was, "If you're looking for salvation, you've entered the wrong chapel." That's what he said to me in the piano.
Oh.
Right, all over Mr. Rogers, dude. I didn't like question his faith or anything. I didn't think. I asked him to play Mr. Rogers, man. Like, relax, dude.
Larry Lee says they did that with a cockroach on The Fifth Element. They steered the cockroach. I don't remember that in The Fifth Element.
I don't really remember that movie if I've seen it.
So they have they have remote behavioral influence technology, LRAD, which is long range acoustic device, and then DARPA has their sonic projectors. So, you know, who knows? That, and then of course, 2 Thessalonians chapter 2 talks about a strong delusion that God will send for those who are willfully ignorant. And we don't know how that works, but that's out there. And then you've got just
so let me stop you there, because we can look at that one two ways with the strong delusion. So do you think the Mandela effect is the strong delusion? Do you think the strong delusion is the denial of the Mandela effect?
Oh, for sure it's the denial. Because I'll tell you why. Because if you look up delusion in the dictionary definition of delusion is that you believe what's incorrect and you're resistant to facts. Okay, so if you and I sit down, you're Pastor Joe Schmo, right? And I sit down with you and I got my 3-inch binder of facts. Now, facts, if you look up facts, that means stuff that's, well, truth is things that are factual, and facts are things that are obvious. Okay. So if I have 20 pastors that all tell me the wrong answer, that's obvious that something is happening. Okay. So, now I totally forgot what I was going to say. Isn't that so unbelievable?
We were talking about why the deniers are the delusional ones, and I call them delusional.
Okay, thank you. So delusion means you believe what's incorrect and you're resistant to facts. So if I'm showing you who's the one coming to the table willing to have an intelligent discourse, it's us. We're willing to have our positions challenged and to provide empirical data and evidence and supporting, and we can't, I mean, in 7 years, I have not been able to get any debate, not one. Any kind of meetings I've had are cut short, or I'm yelled at or thrown out or whatever. Actually, by the way, I finally have a pastor that's going to come on the live stream next week for an interview, which is like, I told the guy today, I talked to him, I said, you're an enigma. Okay. You're, you are like 1 in a million. Okay. The fact that you know the Bible's changing, you're a pastor, and you're willing to talk to us, and come on, this is like out of the, so that's my point, is they're delusional. They are the dictionary definition of delusional because they are resistant to facts.
Yep.
Thank you. All right. So let me go to cognitive dissonance. Cognitive dissonance is different. And this is a visceral reaction to a paradigm that's diametrically opposed or different than what you have held. So now the reason that this is so compelling for people, why they freak out so much, is because human beings are very tribal. Now, we don't really have that sense in society, but if you look at pagans, you can picture it better, right? Tribes. So we're tribal, though. So your first day at high school, and you walk in the lunchroom, and you see the goth people, you see the jocks, you see the burnouts, and you see this, super geek guys. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't have an identity yet. You're just normal, whatever. And then all of a sudden, one of the people in one of the groups raises their hand and then says, hey, come on over here. You get welcomed immediately. You're going that way. And what do? You adopt all of their beliefs because you want to belong to that tribe, because that's a super important part of being a human, right? So humans want to align themselves with a community. People latch onto a tribe, and then they draft an identity around that. And then you draw strength from the tribe. That's why kids in inner cities will join a gang and kill people just to be accepted, right? They're good kids, but they want to be accepted more. So what happens is, if that tribe membership is then challenged, you will defend that with your life. Okay? Your membership to the tribe is impervious to evidence, in other words. And so,
but then that tribe's like really just a cult, isn't it?
Well, no, it's just human nature is what I'm saying. So when we go to people with flat earth or Mandela, what we don't realize is that we're not just challenging their beliefs, we're challenging who they are at a very basic level. This is their entire identity is at stake. And so very few people are strong enough within themselves, or whatever the makeup, the psychological makeup of a truther. That's what my book is actually covering. Okay. My book is called What It's Like to Be a Conspiracy Theorist, Advice for Truthers. And it goes into the different, why am I a truther? Why is a normie? And all these underlying belief things that drive this decision process that leave you out there where the masses are, or in here with the kooks, living on the fringe, trafficking in the dark corners of the internet, living in our mom's basement. That's how we're characterized.
So right? That's how people perceive us, but it couldn't be any, again, inverted. Everything's inverted, dude. I mean, God. Live in my mom's basement. I mean, I live great life.
Yeah.
I have great people around me,
You've got subliminal stuff. I mean, look at They Live. that's a lot of that's real. All of the subliminal stuff with Disney, I mean, it's all in advertising. They've proven subliminals work in advertising. They flash a half a second in the drive-in movies. I saw that study, and sales of popcorn doubled. Okay, and so you can bypass the moral filter of the victim and get them to internalize whatever kind of principles you want with subliminals. It's incredibly effective. Well, we're getting bombarded with that. You got aerosol spraying, 5G. Who knows what they're whispering in our ear through the Wi-Fi. And then you've got all these technologies and nano stuff that has patents for 33 different functions of nanos that are being sprayed on us, probably in the aerosol spraying. And some of them have transmit capabilities, so they can receive or transmit, and they go into your brain and do all kinds of nice things. But I have a present for you, Brian. Okay, I got to go to the screen. I know you're going to love me for this. One moment, please. Okay, so here is Fruit of the Loom. Obviously, everybody, I don't know if there is another type of underwear, but Fruit of the Loom is like the man when it comes to underwear. And look at that. I mean, please.
Yeah. I mean, everybody remembers the one on the left. So we're supposed to just throw these anchor memories out. Like, we actually owned these products and multiple times and saw the tags on your underwear and t-shirts. Now that's never been part of this reality. Don't deny that this is happening. And of course, it gets much bigger than underwear, like as we see right here, which is...
All right, can you go ahead and read that for us?
Do you recall the Statue of Liberty being damaged by a terrorist attack? July 30th.
Oh, I know this is a hot one for you, baby. This is Black Tom terrorist attack. The Black Tom explosion was an act of sabotage. I'm going to just set this up for you, and I'm going to turn you loose, okay?
Cool.
The Black Tom explosion was an act of sabotage by agents of the German Empire to destroy U.S.-made munitions that were to be supplied to the Allies in World War I. The explosions, which occurred on July 30th, 1916 in New York Harbor, killed 4 people and destroyed some $20 million, which is $500 million in today's worth, of military goods. This incident, which happened prior to the U.S. entry into World War I, also damaged the Statue of Liberty. It is one of the largest artificial non-nuclear explosions in history, which I, as a grown man, never heard of until Brian said something about it on a live stream like 2 years ago. I think when the first time I heard him talk about it. All right, and here's some pictures of the damage that probably none of us have ever heard of, right?
No.
Which is how. Okay, so there you go. Tell us about Black Tom.
And I've asked everybody you could imagine, especially when I first started doing Mandela Effect content. I would post about it on Facebook and Twitter and do polls. And this is as slam dunk as Mirror, Mirror, a Lion and the Lamb. I mean, nobody's ever heard of this gigantic event. And let's talk about it a little bit. So, when I went to school and through my journeys of 9/11, and whether you're looking at 9/11 through the mainstream or you're looking at it through conspiracy eyes and those type of things, you get it pummeled into you how 9/11 was the second foreign attack on U.S. soil and Pearl Harbor was the first. I mean, you hear it over and over and over and over again. Nobody's ever mentioned Black Tom. And think about this. So this happened in New York, where the Statue of Liberty was allegedly damaged from this event. Well, it was in this reality. Okay, and we'll get more into that. But the idea that wouldn't specifically be brought up of patriotic reasons, 9/11, like, hey, the time the Germans bombed New York and damaged the symbol of freedom, right? Never happened. But there's even another wrinkle to it. Besides the 1 million pounds of TNT, and that number just keeps going up. 4 dead, 120 injured, all the windows in Lower Manhattan supposedly blown out. The Statue of Liberty's torch, when it was damaged in 1916, in this timeline, reality, whatever you want to call it, it's been closed ever since to the public. Yet I've spoken to people that have been to the torch, but that's not a possibility now in this reality. And again,
so let me get this straight. Yeah. According to this present timeline, the Black Tom explosion is when the Statue of Liberty stopped allowing people to go to the torch because it was damaged.
Yeah.
Because I know people that went up to the torch as well.
Yeah. And if
Oh,
you ask them for photographs of them inside the torch, you're going to find that those photographs are tucked in a Bible that says lion and lamb, which we know doesn't exist. Those photographs won't exist.
Wow, that's totally freaky. Oh my gosh. So yeah, I've never heard of it until you mentioned it. Like I think it was like a year ago.
Yeah.
Never heard of it.
And now there's more German attacks since just the last time we talked. I just want to hear about it real quick because we've talked about Torpedo Alley and the 5,000 dead that nobody's heard about off the coast of North Carolina.
Yeah.
Now there's there's a bombing of the Hey, how about this? And we're going to be careful with this part because I know the censorship in YouTube. But 2 years ago there was that incident at the Capitol. Whatever anybody's thoughts is on it doesn't matter, right? What matters is how much that was talked about by everybody, all over the media, all over YouTube, right? When did you ever hear them talk about in that coverage about the time the Germans bombed the Capitol?
Right.
So now there's a German spy that came over in 1915. So now this predates Black Tom. And there's a German spy that came over, blew up the Capitol building, and then he went to J.P. Morgan's house and shot him twice and tried to kill him. You ever heard about that?
Nope.
So these are huge historical insertions. It's much deeper than Mirror Mirror. We're talking biblical changes. We're talking huge historical changes. Multiple German attacks. Of course, all the German name changes and everything. What's all that mean? We don't know. We're trying to figure it out. But this is definitely profound. The idea that you could blow off 1 million pounds of TNT in New York Harbor and nobody's ever heard about it. I mean, again.
Yeah.
We're talking about the most produced book in the world, the most famous animated film of all time, the metropolis of the United States. Like, we're not talking about my uncle's graduation from the 1970s has a Mandela effect in it, and we can't find the tape.
Right. I lived in New York for 10 years. I went to schools. I went to public schools or whatever. But yeah, no, it seems impossible for anybody that wasn't living under a rock to never have heard of this. So here's while we're on the topic, I got Ellis Island residual because of course the Statue of Liberty is not on Ellis Island. It's not,
and she's on a star fort now. She used to be on 2 square platforms. Now she's sitting on top of a star fort, which is completely foreign to me until 5 years ago.
And there's another aspect to this which is worth mentioning, which is Lady Liberty turns out to be the poster child for the transpocalypse.
Yep, and I done a video on this. I done a video a few years ago on the trans agenda being pushed through via the Mandela effect, and I had the Statue of Liberty on the thumbnail, and many people have noticed it looking more masculine incrementally. And I'll let you run with that, and then I want to talk on another cosmetic Mandela effect change to it that we didn't get to yet.
So if you look at the Statue of Liberty's face there, it looks like a man. Okay, so if you get into the history of it, what you find is that it's based on Addis. Addis was, hold on a second. Addis was the main servant of Staveley, or who was Ishtar, the wife of Baal, the sun god. And this guy Addis here on the left, he castrated himself. And he cross-dressed. So he's a guy who's a cross-dresser with the sunbeam hairdo, okay? And doesn't Lady Liberty look like this guy? So hold on now. So here's Miss Congeniality in her movie with the Lady Liberty hairdo. And of course, Sandra Bullock, the name Bullock means a castrated bull. That's not an accident. And then, of course, if you drill down further, you find more evidence of this, where this is a bust of Nimbus, and he's got the same halo. He's an ancient pagan sun god, a guy. And look at Statue of Liberty, not looking much like a woman at all. And I don't think it's changed. I just think we didn't notice this.
Yeah.
And the same thing with Helios, the Colossus of Rhodes. So I believe what the Statue of Liberty is actually not a beacon of freedom, like we've all been told in history class or whatever. It's a mocking testament to your enslavement. The elites are mocking us with the Statue of Liberty because he's a guy. He's a tranny. I mean, I could be wrong, but I'm just saying. It's just outrageous. All right, Smokey the Bear has never existed. It's always been Smokey Bear. However, if you go to smokeybear.com, he's been Smokey Bear since 1944. He's never been Smokey the Bear. And King Henry never held a turkey leg in his hand. And Vaseline never existed. It was always Vaseline. And if you go to vaseline.com, what you'll find is it's always been Vaseline. And here is actually a picture from 1872, a horse-drawn carriage, and it was always Vaseline. Here's the original product. So if you remember Vaseline, you're just misremembering. I'm sorry. Go get a checkup at your local psychologist. And then I don't know if anybody is well read, but they may have remembered this book. The picture of Dorian Gray was never that. It was always the portrait of Dorian Gray. And you see this image here on the right? I actually got this from Amazon. If you go to amazon.com, I think it's still there, you can actually buy a book called The Portrait of Dorian Gray. And so then, this is the original book, and it says the picture. Now, this is, why the Mandela effect is so exotic. It's so bizarre, because when we experience the Mandela effect, we're having a vivid memory of something which never existed. Okay, it wasn't the portrait of Dorian Gray like 20 years ago. Before 20 years ago, it was portrait, and then it changed. No, it's way more freaky than that. It's always been
all the way. When people say what's a Mandela effect, we're talking about physical matter changing retroactively all the way back to its origin.
Oh, say that again. That's a great way to describe it. Say it again.
Physical matter changing retroactively all the way back to its origin point.
Correct. So whatever mindset, there's like, I don't know, maybe 3 prevailing theories about what is we're experiencing. One is a time stream theory where there's, what we call realities that we shift from one that is similar, obviously, or parallel universes where it's another world which has all the same people, but they're varied. And then there's just the consciousness theory where, and I don't really understand that one, but what we know
I'll
it is.
tell you, I'm a one reality guy. I'm not a multiple timeline, multiple reality guy. There's too many things that don't make sense to me as far as all the residues here. We see incremental changes and flip-flops here. Everybody that's in this reality has memory. So, for the most part. So I think it's this reality that's changing. I don't think we're jumping timeline.
I agree. I'm a one reality guy too, but let me give you one thought on that before we move on, okay?
Yeah.
When I was talking to somebody and they were telling me about how there was an Exxon station that they went to, or I'll just use IKEA. Okay, IKEA was never on this road that I know. Okay, it was never there. Now there's an IKEA there, and you go there, and it's been there 20 years. Well, how is that possible, right? The parallel universe theory actually makes that much easier to understand. So if I'm in Earth number 1, and that one has no IKEA, and then I go to Earth number 2, and there is an IKEA, that's a lot easier for me to comprehend than if my Earth changes, right? So now that
happened, let me add this to you. So let's say I'm in your town with you, right? Say I go to your house, we're hanging out, and then we go for a ride by the IKEA that's now always been there for 20 years. I'm going to experience that IKEA as well, right? So if the theory is we came from Earth 1 and we came to Earth 2 and that IKEA has always been there, right?
Yes.
Why don't we see 100% the same Mandela effects as each other?
Well, we do for the most part. I mean, I've definitely found
No,
there's a consensus.
most part, but there's always going to be some that were on the fence of, which
Okay,
I
but you
find.
could have within the phenomenon, you can have what we call reality bubbles, right?
Yeah.
Where for the most part we all
And I
share the.
tell people I'm open to the idea of coming from one place to another or one big jump. But on top of that, since we got here, this reality is in flux, in my opinion.
All right, well, that would mean that you have the example of the pharaoh throwing down his staffs, his musicians. The pharaoh's magicians used their dark arts. They threw down their staff and it became a snake. We have a very clear biblical example of the devil using dark arts to change wood into a complex organism. Right? It's clear from the context that it was not sleight of hand. It literally happened. All right. So we know that it's possible that matter can be transformed by the devil. It's important to point that out, that this is not God doing a miracle. This is the devil doing a miracle. With me so far? Okay. So on a bigger scale, you now are proposing that the devil has somehow turned up the volume on that ability, doing alchemy on a global scale. And so now we are experiencing the fact that this construct that we live and move in, which appears solid, is actually much more like a video game, where if I'm playing the video game, I can press the cheat code or whatever, and suddenly my character has a new armor, and I push another button. Now, boom, he has a new sword. So there's like no reality to the reality. It's like the Matrix movie, right? Our reality is the same, just on a much larger scale or whatever. And so we're able to experience those changes, which to us are physical. But if the two slit experiment isn't propaganda, if that's true, then that explains a lot. Okay, because particles acted like waves when they were observed. I mean,
Maybe I just haven't done the proper looking into it, but I need to see proof of that. I need somebody we trust to recreate the experiment.
Yeah, you got to take the word of the officialdom on that one. But let's just say that is true, because I do believe, quantum, entanglement. I think that's probably all true. I don't think they're making that up. So you have the idea that at the quantum level, things are operating with different rules, and if observation changes the way, if human observation changes the way that the reality acts, that's pretty compelling to what we're talking about here, right?
Absolutely. Very, very relevant.
Cliff High, you've heard of Cliff High, right? He's way out there, okay? But he's super linguist, and he created the software to Spider to go out and try to trade stocks, and it turned out he was getting returns where he found that human beings were minorly clairvoyant, is what he says. And his system started to bring back things that then started happening that couldn't possibly have been predicted. Like a lake will empty out in Peru and overnight, and boom, then it happened. Or this cruise liner will run aground over here in this part of the world, right? So he started seeing this thing that he created predicting the future. All right, so what he did was at one point he pointed it towards the D wave. Now I know that you came out with the idea that Geordie Rose is just leading us down a path to make us believe that they are causing the Mandela effect, when it's something much more exotic. And I'm fine with that, but just go with me for a second here.
Yeah, man. Hey, listen, I'm wide open. I'm certainly not convinced that I have all the pieces to the puzzle. And this all could be very multifaceted too. So many of these theories could be at play as well. So, but I just real quick before you go on the Geordie Rose thing, just so we can clarify, everybody knew. I do think that is the psyop. They want you to believe that it's CERN, that it's D-Wave, that it's quantum computers. And I see the same agenda from mainstream science all the time. That's why I have to obviously question the double slit seriously. Everything I see them do is a way to try and undermine the creator and hide the supernatural.
That's a great point.
That's my take. But let's hear what you have to say about Gordy Rose. And I'm just going to go off camera for 1 minute to grab a drink.
Okay.
I have my head.
No, I got to tell you, ever since you said that, it has really tempered my enthusiasm about the D wave, because we've all kind of piled on that idea. What's causing this? Well, it's CERN and the D wave. Well, there's some people that have said that Mandela was happening way before 2016 when Google Analytics shot up, right? July of 2016 is when they said they turned up CERN to the full power for the first time. July 2016 is when the searches for the term Mandela effect went through the roof. So that's a very clear correlation, right? Was that planned to lead us to believe that it was CERN? Or is what Brian's saying is true? They did that on purpose to lead us down the primrose path. So let me take the other side of that argument with Cliff High's research, which I don't believe is fabricated.
Let's also remember that if it's or D-Wave computers or anything of this, whatever it is, there's no randomness to this. It has to have an intricate knowledge of our lives and some of the intelligence behind some of the changes, especially the personal ones.
Wait, say that again. That bounced off my head. Say that again.
The intelligence behind some of the changes and the personal connections we have and the personal changes. That's another thing that makes me very doubtful that it's CERN doing it, by changing something worldwide. Like maybe if they could do it, like an Ed McMahon change or something like that, a worldwide thing, maybe that would make some sense. But there's so many like personal Mandela effects that it's hard for me to think that it's that technology. I don't know if that made sense to you, but continue.
I think I understand what you mean. In other words, we seem to be having some causative aspect to this, not just being done to us. Is that what you mean?
Yeah, a lot of it, and I think some of it is kind of just continue because I'll go on for a while.
Okay, all right. So if Cliff High's research is correct, all right, what he did was he pointed his spider. I can't remember what it's called, but I bought his studies. He came out during when cryptos were on the last move up. He was pointed it at the cryptos, and he was hitting all kinds of stuff right. It was pretty compelling. All right. So anyway, he pointed it at the D-Wave computer because there's a number of them. Google has one. University of California has one. There's like a bunch of them. So he started collecting, and what he does is he basically eavesdrops on the internet because he's a linguist and a programmer, and then he programs these algorithms to interpret what the conversations that are having. Assuming human beings are minorly clairvoyant, it will predict things that are happening. I've watched them over the years. It's very accurate in a lot of ways. Okay, so what he found was there was a very high correlation geographically to where these D-Wave computers were located to the number of reported Mandela effects. So there's a concentration of people noticing the Mandela effect in and around where the D-Wave computers are located. Now, that alone wasn't compelling. What he then talked about was compelling because his IQ is off the charts. He's extremely smart. Genius level guy, very, very, very well studied. So what he said was he just explained how the qubit works. And essentially, it has to be put into a canister where they drop it down to like close to 0 Kelvin as they can get. And the reason they do that is because they found that human awareness, I'm not getting the right term, consciousness is the word. They had to isolate the qubit from any human consciousness or else it interfered with its operation. So it has to be in a human consciousness vacuum to function. So at the epicenter of all of these concentration of people saying they were having a Mandela effect was this human consciousness vacuum. Isn't that interesting?
Definitely interesting.
And the D-Wave doing its thing. And so it's very possible that
What does that mean though? The D wave doing its thing. Like what do we suppose these? I know these are like super cool computers, super fast. Like what is it that makes these that people think is so suspicious that these things can actually tap into the fabric of our reality?
well, I read several of the white papers. I went to their site and I started to read into how this thing works, and it's very wiggy, man. I mean, when you get into the white papers, it's like, really? Because they're talking in those white papers how this thing works, and it's sci-fi stuff. It's dimensional, and it's basically it's operating on the fact that you have superposition and at the quantum level. That means that um, a point can be a point of energy could be at two places at once, and you can have quantum entanglement where imagine you flip a card over on a table and the card on the other side of the table flips over at the exact same time. That's what quantum entanglement.
Familiar with that. Yeah.
So with regular computers, you have 0 and 1. You have yes or no, on or off. Whereas with quantum computers, you can have actually 4 different options simultaneously. So what a super Cray computer would take, 20 years to calculate, this thing can do it in 2 seconds or whatever. So it's getting to be godlike intelligence at its capacity.
It still has to be able to manipulate our physical reality and time.
Okay, but that's why CERN is very involved in DNA research. I don't know how much you've looked into that, but there's a lot of technology and labs and stuff associated to CERN where they're combining the CERN research with DNA. So if you think about the transporter on Star Trek, okay, you go on to the Star Trek transporter, and you're a human being, right, made of all these molecules, and they read your molecules, and then they disassemble you into a packet that's recorded, and then they beam you in a beam that they can shoot, and when you get to the other side, they reconstitute you. Okay, so essentially, if we're just like novices, laymen, we're just guessing at how this works. What's the physics of a miracle? Like Philip was translated down the road 30 miles, or the axe head floated, or Jesus walked through walls. There's obviously some physics behind the miracles that we read about in the Bible, and these things.
And my thing is, I trust the miracles of the Bible more than I do said miracles from science. That's maybe that's a roadblock I'm coming up against, but I just don't know if they have the power to do that. But it's definitely interesting. I'm glad we're talking about it, and you're much more well versed on it than I am. So I'm glad to have this conversation. So.
I mean, Pharaoh's magicians probably didn't have a D-Wave computer behind the throne there. They had the dark arts, it says.
Yeah.
And I mean, I know Satanists that have come out of Satanism, and they will tell you what they were able to do, and you wouldn't even believe it.
So this is like their new form of dark arts through technology, kind of, is what you're saying.
Yeah. So there's it's very feasible that the effects are a combination, of conjuring, and they're drawing the demonic forces through witchcraft and rituals and technology. Like, did you ever see the movie Hellboy? Hellboy.
No, I've seen images of it, but I never watched it.
Okay, well, there's one scene in one of the Hellboys where this one guy who was a high-level Satanist said that's actually real, where they opened this portal and they brought Hellboy out of it. He said that thing they showed you is actually real. They put this stuff in front of us, baby. They let us see it.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
So, I'm telling you, man, it's just like, I'm still sharing my screen. All right. So there's a couple of things I want to get to here. This is just like examples of residual with the portrait of Dorian Gray. So you got all these critics writing articles about this book when it came out, and they're getting it wrong. And you start, adding up the probabilities. You can go into newspapers.com and just about any one of these things, Skippy peanut butter, and find 700 ads that are wrong. I mean, the numbers are so astronomical. But look at this. This is Goodreads. Goodreads.com is a place where you can buy The Portrait of Dorian Gray. It's a book for sale.
I mean, but then when you order it, it's going to happen. If you order it, it's going to come.
I don't know. I didn't order it. Folgers Coffee, Residual. This was a big one. Cheez-Its versus Cheez-It. And this one was huge for me. I remember God being above Adam. I mean, that was 100%.
Absolutely. Yeah. I showed this last night on an interview that I did, and
another there?
Higher than God,
Right. All right. So I don't know how far, if we want to get into this, but this is 12 different biases.
Let's do it, dude. I got time, so we can keep going.
You still good? All right. So, yeah, because these I read these last night, and most of them are things that we're experiencing with the normie when we try to talk to them about these conspiracies. They have an anchoring bias, okay, which is over relying on the first piece of information obtained and using it as a baseline for comparison. So this is very common. Over relying on the first piece of information is what you just mentioned before, where they'll latch on to one thing and beat you over the head with it. No matter how compelling your evidence, they'll just point to this straw man argument, basically. Mm-hmm. Right? Availability bias, making decisions based on immediate information or examples that come to mind. Bandwagon effect.
That's like when they just Google something and tell you you're wrong. That's what that is.
Oh, phenomenal. Yep. There you go. Bandwagon effect. A person is more likely to go along with a belief if there are many others who hold that belief. Well, we know that one's sick.
Oh, we've seen that play out in the last 3 years.
All right. Number 4, the choice supportive bias. Once a decision is made, people tend to overfocus on its benefits and minimize its flaws. Let me read the example. Search committee members may emphasize rationale that supports decisions they have made in the past. We hired someone from a prestigious unit. That doesn't really resonate. Confirmation bias, paying more attention to information that reinforces previously held beliefs and ignoring evidence to the contrary. Yeah.
Yep.
Well, sure. So that's 2.
That's like the biggest roadblock with most is number 5.
Yep. Fundamental attribution error, overemphasizing personal factors and underestimating situational factors. That's what did I say? Confirmation. What's the first one? I said normalcy bias. That's what that is right there. That's your not moving off of your long-held position. Halo effect, judging others similarly on all traits. In-group preference or the jerk factor. I didn't like that one. The ostrich effect, that's for sure. Avoiding bad news.
That goes right up with number 5. Number 10 and number 5 are 2 of the biggest ones right there. We got lots of ostriches when it comes to this.
All right, well, this is the one I really wanted to talk about. This one is really going to open your eyes to what makes people tick.
Cool.
And why we're seeing what we're seeing. Now, my theory is that it's not one thing. It's a lot of things, and we've talked about quite a few of them. So when you come up against a normie and they're just totally recalcitrant, you can't get them to reason logically, just consider that there's all these different things that you're dealing with. Right? And one of them is what's called the reticular activating system. It is a network of neurons located in the brainstem. And what this part of the brain does is it's responsible for wakefulness, your ability to focus, fight or flight, and how we ultimately perceive the world.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And so, hold on a second now. Just hold on now. Okay. So the NAS, we'll call it the RAS, decides what is important and what can safely be ignored. Okay. It's responsible for cardiovascular function, pain reception, sleep cycle, and the response of how we perceive the world. Think about that.
Yeah,
It's basically
it's
like a
literally
filter.
it's literally a physical filter of truth inside
Yep.
your body.
So it often described as a filter or like a bouncer. Like a bouncer decides who gets in, right? And it determines what's allowed and what's not allowed. And it makes sure your brain doesn't have to handle more information than it can handle. And it's a gatekeeper because we have billions of bits of info coming in. So a great example is a sleeping mother in a noisy New York apartment where she's able to sleep through the day with horns and sirens. But as soon as her baby on the other side of the room makes a noise, she wakes up. That's the RAS blocking out the things that are inconsistent with her paradigm or will cause danger. But when the baby makes a noise, it taps her on the shoulder, wakes her up. Okay. Another example is when you're going to buy, you decide you're going to buy a Honda Accord, and now everywhere you go, you start noticing Honda Accords. That's the RAS, because now the Honda Accord is now part of your paradigm, and all of a sudden it starts letting in to your consciousness the Honda Accord. Oh, there's another Honda Accord, and you start to see it. Well, they were always there. This part of your brain was blocking it. Okay. So now you come up to the person who has grown up seeing the big blue marble. And I remember watching the moon landing, and I remember blah, 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 blah. And here comes this guy trying to tell you that it's all bunk, and your RAS is just shut it off. So that's what you're up against.
Yeah.
So how do you get around that, though? How do you fix that?
Well, you have to, it's not the same for everybody. So you really have to know who you to gauge you're talking to. You got to kind of poke away at people a little bit, and dropping the blue marble on them or their reality shifting might not be what they're ready for. And you have to come at them with something a little softer, a little easier, and try and penetrate through that wall and chipping away at it rather than coming crashing through that brick wall with a cannonball, right?
No doubt. No doubt. There's a process for deprogramming somebody that's in a cult. You got to bring them out,
And some people can take it. I was able to, many times take that big thing like that and not have too much of a problem. But some people definitely you can't. Which is why even myself, and I hate how the media presents the Mandela effect. When I first approach people, I approach them with the easy stuff, get them in with a couple that, couple the softies, mirror, whatever.
Yeah.
These slam dunks. And then you rarely start to test them. And then they'll be like, did you know that the Bible's changing?
You had an example where you were in a taxi once, and you had a recording of it or video of it, and I watched you do that so well. I remember thinking that was really smooth. How you just drew that person in a little bit at a time. And so, but they still have the same problem. So how do you get them to the point where they go, I see it? And then remember what the term perceive means. It means to have you're concerned about it. Right. It's one thing to acknowledge it's happening, but so many people just acknowledge it and then they go back to their life. So that it doesn't change.
That's why you got to give them both. I got to give them both. I got to hit them with the easy stuff first, but not let them get away from me until we get into bigger things. Now, obviously, if I see the preachers on the street with the Bible, I can go right into big things with them. But
yeah.
And sometimes I don't get to that point. It doesn't get to that point, and the conversation ends, and all I got to tell them was something small or whatever. Yeah, you got to try and reel them in, though. That's my thing. I mean, I don't walk up to people and just drop Black Tom on them. Try and reel them in. Or like I don't sit next to somebody at the bar, right, and say, "Hey, the earth's flat." But what I do is I say something like, "Hey, I mean, I seen a guy sit down with a SpaceX shirt. He sat down at this Japanese place I was at in Huntington Beach a couple of years ago, and I sat next to him. I said, "So, what do you think about the car in space?" He's like, "What do you
Excellent.
mean?" And then it just opened up the whole conversation. That's like an easy way in. You don't just say, "Hey, the globe's a lie," right? So it went from, "What do you think about the car in space?" And then I told him how there were no modifications made. They just threw a car up there and supposedly doing laps around the sun, all this nonsense, right? And it really got him thinking. And then I said, "What do you think about the horizon out here?" I mean, they tell you a boat goes over the curve of the earth at about 3 miles, but why don't you try to zoom back in on it? You can bring that boat back. Now you're left with two choices. You either have magic boat lifting binoculars, or the boat didn't go over a physical curve of anything. And that's just how your eyes work, So you got to kind of know your way in. With the thing that's been going, and we'll stay away from it, but the thing that's been going on the last couple of years, that's really made it easy as a point of a conversation to get in with people, because even the people that still believe they still believe politics, they've seen enough malarkey going on that they're ready to wonder what else we're being lied to about, and they're ready to have some conversations. I see this everywhere because of that. But as far as the Mandela effect, unless you know somebody personally and how they are and where they're at as far as their awakening, I don't think you can come in too strong.
No, it's like fishing. You got to throw the line out, let them nibble, reel them in a little bit. No doubt, try to find those hot buttons. This is an interesting statement here. This is a very common viewpoint, and I'd like to just maybe end with this topic here.
Cool.
And I'm not putting Cindy on the spot, because this is a very common. I hear this a lot. Cindy's saying, "You'll never get them to reason. God said he would send them a great delusion. From what I'm seeing, he has definitely done that." So the concept is that this is a fool's errand, right? There's no use. Only those that God wants to see will see. And it's not fatalism. Fatalism means you just know, you only believe what's supposed to happen will happen. This is more like helplessness or powerlessness, right? So if I use the biblical analogy, if I'm a soul winner, Jesus said, "Follow me and I'll make you fishers of men." So if I believe the Bible's true, then I'm going to go out and I'm going to, compel people to close with Christ and make, peace with God, right? So if I hold that same view that people have in our community about the Mandela effect, that it's a fool's errand, it's so hard to try to convince anybody, it's impossible. Well, I don't believe that could possibly be true, because if it's true there, then it's also got to be true for evangelism, because the exact same principle. The lost are also blind, and if it's completely impossible to convince anybody that these things are happening, then it's also impossible to win a soul, and God tells us to go, right? So what do you think of that? I'm gonna step away for a second, Brian, so just keep talking. I'll be right back. Keep going.
All right, cool. I don't think it's impossible, and I feel like I have a responsibility to try. And I am definitely know that we're not going to wake the whole world up. A lot of people like us, had these delusions of grandeur for the first few years, maybe, and that percent goes down and down. But I do think that people deserve a chance to know and at least try and get that spark going in them, because most of the people that are lost in this world, some of them, the responsibility is on them, and ultimately it is to start looking into things, but they got dealt a pretty crappy hand and they were led into a world of deception. So I don't think that everybody's hopeless. I don't think we're going to get like the majority of the world or anything crazy like that, like, wake up half the world. But I'm always going to try, because it's the right thing to do. And I do think it's so important that everybody realizes this is happening. And we talked about theories. What if it's us that's causing a lot of this, So we want as many people to help and see what we can do to this reality. Yeah.
No doubt. So maybe take a couple of questions, and maybe have some closing thoughts if you've got any burning questions or comments out there, please feel free to post them in the chat, and we'll try to respond here in a second. And then please subscribe, and down below you can join the newsletter and let us keep you posted on, because we're getting shadow banned, of course. So it's good to be in the newsletter. You can find out when we're going to be posting and doing a live stream, when the book comes out, stuff like that. And Brian, what do you got coming up? Anything scheduled coming up in the next week or so?
No, nothing particular. Just me normally, randomly going live when I do. I've been doing a lot of meetups and stuff lately. And the other thing I've been doing that I wanted to touch on earlier, the reason we were at that piano bar is we were going to a karaoke bar to get on stage and then sing songs and just with change lyrics that are written as truth of songs. And we did this at several places. And the reaction's been amazing. And it sparked so many conversations, dude. It's a really cool thing. So that's what we were literally doing. We did it in Greenville up here at a place called City Tavern. I held a meetup there at 6, and I knew karaoke was at 10. We were already talking to people in there about these type of topics. And then we went up and sang, there's a song we have called, I don't even want to say the C word, but That Is a Lie. And it's written to the Bon Jovi Wanted Dead or Alive. So even the DJ doesn't know what's going on. He thinks we're going up to sing Bon Jovi, right? And we just go out, we're belting out all these lyrics about the last 3 years, and everybody was talking to us about it after, So I think these do more stuff like that, do more meeting people in person. I'd like to do a meetup every month. I just ran into some serious car trouble the other day that cost me a lot of money yesterday, so it might be a few weeks, but I'm thinking in the middle of March, like spring break, I'd like to throw another big meetup. I don't know if you can come, if it's in the area where we've done the last few. That'd be cool.
Oh yeah, you got one coming up?
Well, I'd like to do one soon. It probably won't be till next month though, like maybe 4 or 5 weeks from now. So I'll let you know for sure. I mean, I'm gonna try and keep doing that, and I do think it's important we connect not just here, but offline and meet each other when we can. I know that's not everybody's thing; it's not required, but I love it. I think it's great, and I just think we all should. And not every time we're out, you don't have to, but I do think that we all know that there's hundreds or thousands of people that are gonna watch these videos or in these communities, and these people, there's a lot of people that do think like us or do know they're being lied to, but they don't know they have anybody to talk to, and we know better. So it's our responsibility to try and reach out to them. In fact, no matter what I talk to somebody about, when I start to talk to them and see that there's some thought there, first thing I do when I start to give them my business card for my channels and stuff is I let them know that there's a whole bunch of people that think like us, and we do live shows all the time with 100 people in the chat or whatever, and we open the phones and anybody can call in, and you don't even have to, you can just sit there and watch. And I just let them know, because I think that's one of the most important things, and let people know it's okay to not conform and to think for yourself and do what you think is right,
Absolutely. And I believe 2023 will be a year of vindication for conspiracy theorists the world over. I think that the worldview of the normie is about to collapse and fold in front of them. And for those of you that are like me, that have been persecuted and forsaken and misunderstood, you're going to be sought after. You're going to be I don't know if you'll be apologized to, but you're going to start to have, out of necessity, your loved ones asking you, did you see the giants running down the highway into the woods? Why are there 40-foot giants, Dad? And why are the, why is there no food in the stores and the banks are closing? And why did aliens land on I heard aliens landed on the Washington lawn. Now, you were right. I don't know what's going to happen, right? But we're going to start to see things. I mean, we are so close to war right now. I can't even believe how close we are to war.
John, we know that they lied to us about where we came from, what this place is, where it's located, and the underlying aspects of this reality. Like, that's as big as it gets. And the normie doesn't realize any of that. We have a responsibility to at least try and see who at least, and if somebody, they're never going to have that spark, then move to the next one. That's fine.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. And it's just,
And I pick my spots. I'm not a guy that stands on the street with the megaphone, but I'm a guy that walks around the street at the beach, and I pick my spots and see who I think I could talk to. I overhear a conversation, jump in, you know, and it's pretty effective. I don't get much negative response. You know, it happens, but it's not often. Yeah, and it might go in one ear out. I'm not saying that's not the case a lot, but overall positive responses from talking to people.
Yeah, me as well. I get a lot of interest, mostly not pushback. Like if I'm eating somewhere, I try to sit at the bar so I can have people around me, because I'm alone. And so I'm sitting there, and I'll always have a book or something, and then I'll get flat earth, and the 2, 3, 4 people on each side are like all leaning in. They all want to hear it. They're not calling me crazy. They want to know, because it's so obvious. They're like, oh, that makes sense. It's so much fun, man. I love bringing up flat earth and just sticking on one thing. Like, how can I see the Chicago skyline from the opposite shore of Lake Michigan? It's 52 miles. There should be 1,540 feet of curvature, and the tallest building is 1,570 feet. And atmospheric lensing doesn't allow you to see around corners. And superior mirage only happens once in a while, but you could see it 24/7.
And a superior mirage, by the way, would be inverted, and it wouldn't be.
That's right. And then so this is what they say. I just did this yesterday. I said all that, and then the lady goes, well, if that's true, how could they fly from Brazil? And I'm like, whoa, you got to answer the first question. They play what about this all the time. So I've been doing this for 7 years, and I finally got one person with my Flat Earth Challenge. I went back and forth for about a month with this one individual. I was sweating, okay? He would always try to wiggle off into some other topic, and I never allowed him to do it. I said, no, I only have one question. I'm a one-trick pony. You got to answer this question. It's not that the earth is flat just in that one location, because you could do this everywhere. It's not atmospheric. And my measurements are correct, because here's all of the main sources, MIT, all of the 4 main calculators all come up with the same measurement. It's not the math isn't wrong. So if that's not that or that, what is it? And then finally, he called me names. He tried to go off here. He finally goes, okay, well, it's the Mandela effect. I was like, hey, that's actually a good answer. But finally, Brian, and this is the only time this has happened in all this time I've been doing this, he finally told me what I was looking for, which was this: John, I don't have an answer. Now, I said all that for everybody listening. It took me a month, okay, to get this person to finally admit the truth. And it was a workout. So that's what you're up against with people. They're going to try to change the subject, say, no, I only have one question, and I pick the question. You don't pick the question. It's this question, which you know very well, and then and they won't be able to answer, obviously. There is no answer for the question. And you watch the fireworks, and it was just so incredible. So I love what I do, man. That's what I'm saying. I love what we do. Love the truth.
Too, man.
This was awesome, Brian, bro. Thank you.
Thank you, man.
Thank you for coming out and sharing yourself with us. And, we're looking forward to interesting times. And be sure to subscribe over there to Brian's channel. And Brian, do you have any closing words or thoughts as we go off in all our directions here tonight?
No, not really. Just thanks for having me on. It's good to do it. And we talked about maybe something else you'll be doing on a regular basis. I'll participate in that. And if anybody is in the North or South Carolina area, well, John and we're going to have a meet up in Charlotte at some point in the not too distant future. And you should really come out and be around 15, 20, 25 awesome people. Have these conversations. It'll be really cool. And we've done it a couple times. So
yeah, I've been to 2 of those. We had a great time. It was a great place. It had some awesome food and great conversations with folks right face to face. You don't get that much.
Yeah. So I'll be in touch with you, and I'm thinking 4 or 5 weeks from now I will do that if that works for you.
Okay, my friend. Appreciate you having time to come out. Look great to see you again, and we'll be in touch. Thanks, everybody. We'll be back here again tomorrow at 7. I got some great content, so be sure to put that in the calendar if you're not doing something. We'll see you then. Have a great evening, everybody. Thanks so much. Good night.